What's up, everybody? It's Pikel with League of Items, and my apologies for not making as many videos recently, but there's not as many games going on. I'm still interacting with Discord when there are matches, but it's just not as interesting for me right now. I like it more when there's a bunch of stuff going on, and like DraftKings and more sports betting and stuff like that. Once we get into the playoffs, you know, I have futures bets, so I'm not as focused on. I don't like live and die with every individual matchup, but I do like going through these matches. So, you know, first, I should say in this video we're going to talk about Evil Geniuses against Team Liquid specifically, and I really do think that Evil Geniuses has a good chance to beat Team Liquid, and in this video I'm going to explain both how, why, and how. I guess for anybody who's watching the LPL finals tomorrow morning, I prefer Top Esports. I had JDG and V5. They both crashed out of playoffs. I don't have any money on RNG, and I'm kicking myself for not having any money on Top Esports because Top Esports was like plus 1,200 or plus 1,400 at one point when I was looking at them, but I never pulled the trigger. But, you know, I posted a decent amount of stuff in Discord already about the Evil Geniuses Team Liquid matchup, and we're going to go through most of that right now. So I am going to be looking at my notes, which, you know, sorry, not sorry. So let's switch to this. All right, so these are the scoreboards for the first or their last match. But before we get into the specifics of like the draft that's going to happen in the next matchup, I wanted to take a look at the player matchups first, and then we're going to take a look at the draft. So first up, we have Bwipo against Impact. Bwipo is obviously an incredibly talented top laner, and right now I think he's better than Impact, but Impact is being asked to do different things than Bwipo. So in their last match, Bwipo played a bunch of different kinds of champions. Impact was actually the more aggressive side in that situation, which was somewhat surprising. And after their loss against 100 Thieves, Team Liquid, I could easily see Team Liquid going in that direction even more heavily, where Bwipo is asked to, you know, play something like Ornn, which might fit into their draft plan that I'll discuss later. But my note was, both players are consistent and will play things like Ornn to help the team. I think Bwipo can carry harder, so I do give Team Liquid the edge in top lane, although I don't expect the series to be top diff. Just meaning, you know, even if Bwipo wins lane super hard, he would also have to be on a carry champion in order for that to even mean anything. And I really don't think that's going to be the situation. One other thing to look for is like things like, you know, Evil Genius is picking champions like Gnar. Gnar is an okay player, an okay champion in general, but if the rest of your team doesn't have really good engage options, then you could ultimately have no engage options, because yes, Gnar does give you that playmaking engage ability, but you're not guaranteed to always have your rage managed the right way. So that's pretty tough sometimes. So that is the top lane. In the jungle, I think Inspired is better than Santorin. Just straight up more talented. I think that when we look back on both of their careers, we'll say that they were both a part of good teams. But when we analyze Inspired's teams, you're going to think, okay, he was like the focal point of that team, or he was the most important player on that team probably, versus Santorin, who is a good team player, but isn't, in my mind, someone that I would want to stack up against, you know, players internationally. And I think that he can be drafted into good positions, and it's good that he can take advantage of those positions. But when you're at a talent discrepancy, and then you're also requiring draft to like level the playing field, that's not a good situation for me. And this one I have a pretty big note, so I'm just going to read the whole note. So yes, Santorin has looked good this split, and I don't think he's a bad player, but he wouldn't be able to play like this on any team that isn't more talented than the enemy. Meaning, like, in drafts where they're against lesser teams, I don't really care if he carries that game because that's not where you're really being tested. But with that being said, I don't expect Team Liquid to put themselves into draft situations where Santorin can be heavily exploited. They will need to prepare something for Nocturne, since Inspired has shown he can play it multiple ways, meaning he does play a damage style Nocturne, but he also plays Nocturne where he's building some supportive items, and he's really just about getting in, slowing the enemy carries, and then providing some support like stats and stuff through Knight's Vow or reducing the tenacity of his target with Anathema's Chains. Ultimately, I think Team Liquid will be in a spot where they feel obligated to play J4, Volley, Viego, which they kind of do anyways. And I think that Evil Geniuses can exploit that through preparation. If anyone on Team Liquid is going to beat me, and this was if I was their coach, if I was Evil Geniuses coach, I would want to force Santorin to play true carry champions, not things like J4, Volley, Viego, but like a true carry jungler. If he beats me that way, then good for you. Team Liquid prepared nicely. Santorin played very well in that scenario. I'd be okay losing like that because that would mean that he outplayed Inspired for an entire series, and just congrats. So that's basically the jungle match, and I do think that the jungle matchup is very important for that reason. If you we'll get to the draft stuff again later, and then we have Bjergsen against JoJo. I think that they're equal right now, but I do think that they're going in opposite directions for their career. Bjergsen has looked good, but you have to look at these drafts and realize a champion like Ahri, while it can snowball and get out of control, it is really just a rotational burst mage. You're not getting that consistent damage. And a lot of his champions require the other player to lock in their choice or counterpick themselves. I think, like in this game, the Akali, yes, like the Ahri lane isn't oppressive enough where it's going to completely shut down an Akali, but it also doesn't make Ahri's life difficult. And he's playing more for the team anyways, and that's fine. Then you had things like the Veigar game. Like, yes, he did play Veigar well, but Veigar is not a very difficult champion. And yes, he can play Victor, but again, Victor is like a rotational burst mage that's controlling a section of the map, has a good ultimate, has good AoE. And like some people consider him a late game carry. I really don't consider Victor a late game carry. I think of late game carries as champions who provide consistent damage throughout the team fight and can be like the focal point of their team in the late game. So like Azir, when Azir is at its peak, can actually carry a late game in a more front to back way. And maybe that's just a limitation of the way I look at the game. But I just really don't see Victor, like one-shotting an enemy carry being a late game carry. Like he's a burst mage. So for Bjergsen against JoJo, yes, Bjergsen is the more consistent player, but I love JoJo's willingness to try and carry games. For example, the Lucian game, and I know the Lucian game kind of went out of control, but his ability to go into a different lane to exploit a matchup, that's the future of League of Legends, and I think that every team will eventually move in that direction, where they're drafting into specific matchups, and they have a player on their team who they're going to use to attack the enemy team's draft, instead of just saying, like, you're our mid laner, you're our top laner. So playmaking upside and recent performances on Ryze will add additional pressure to the draft. If I'm Team Liquid, I probably feel like Ornn, Nocturne, J4, and Ryze. I think I meant to say Jinx. Ornn, Nocturne, J4 is priority. Nocturne is priority. So Ornn, Nocturne, J4, Ryze are all somewhat high priority from a ban perspective. There's also the Nocturne TF problem. Inspired playing Nocturne makes TF a bad pick for Team Liquid because you can always respond with the Nocturne, which it really does a lot to limit TF's roaming the map. But if Team Liquid doesn't do anything about the TF Nocturne trade, like by banning out Nocturne, then Evil Geniuses could go TF plus Nocturne or Ryze plus Nocturne, and it's just a lot of stress on the draft. I think that Team Liquid has more to consider for Evil Genius's style of play than Evil Geniuses does for Team Liquid's style of play. And then last but not least, in the bot lane, Danny and Vulcan against Hansama and CoreJJ. I think that these are the two best bot lanes in the region. Some people will say that FBI and Huhi are better than them. Some people, like, if C9 had a better support, maybe you could make the argument that Berserker belongs in that conversation because he had an amazing split and is a very talented player. There's not really much to say here. I think that Evil Geniuses has the more early game centric, aggressive playstyle. Personally, I think that Danny's better than Hansama at this point. But stylistically, like, Hansama is going to look more clean, more consistent. Danny has that crazy upside where, like, he will put himself into a spot where he will either succeed spectacularly, or fail spectacularly. And that's the kind of player that I want, because he's pushing the limits. He's constantly pushing himself to be the best player in the game. And I love that about Danny. Danny's my favorite player. And it's like not even close at this point. Like, I want Evil Geniuses to win so that Danny wins, because, like, he's the future for North American League of Legends. And then Zeri is going to be another pressure point in pick ban, because you don't want to put Danny on Zeri. You don't want to let Danny get Zeri. So in the last match, Team Liquid was using their bans on Zeri, Lee. So now we're moving into draft talk. So Zeri, Lee LeBlanc, and Nautilus in the first rotation, which is really the most important part of draft, in my opinion, meaning the first 3 champions that you ban out, because it shapes the draft. It changes what picks you're able to make in the first 3 picks, which will impact your draft, your second rotation bans, and then will change, like, which champions have to get blinded. So first of all, we have to ask ourselves a question: is Evil Geniuses talented enough to make this series come down to draft and execution? The answer is obviously yes. They proved that by going to 5 games against Team Liquid in their last matchup. And I think just, you know, from the optics, if you look at the players on both teams, it's like pretty close in most of these matchups where the players are they're all very talented. And they're all, you know, quality players that can win when they have a good draft. And a good game plan. So now we have to think through the drafting. And Team Liquid has side selection, which is very important. And if I'm Team Liquid, I think that they will most likely pick red side. In their last matchup, every single game, I'm pretty sure the team with side selection picked red side. Personally, I think that blue side is still better. I know that some people like the counter pick, but the way that... And I think I've probably made the opposite argument, but right now, if you're Evil Geniuses, you really want to try to get one of those priority picks where it's either Ornn, Jinx, or Ryze, probably. Because that puts a lot of pressure on the other team's draft. And I'll show a picture of, like, this one draft plan that I think is like the most important, or like my optimal draft plan for Evil Geniuses. So this all assumes that Team Liquid's going to pick red side, which I think that they most likely will, unless, you know, they kind of think about it the way that I do, where that first pick is super important. But in general, I think teams right now are saying that red side is more important, and we've seen more teams pick red side. So the first rotation bans, Team Liquid will ban LeBlanc every game. We have only seen like 1 or 2 games of Jojopyun on LeBlanc since he's been a pro, I think, and that just tells me that Team Liquid is saying either Jojopyun's LeBlanc is insane and we can't play against it, or we don't want to play against it and he's just too good at it, or it's very good against the champions that we intend to put Bjergsen on. And I think it's probably both. Like, I don't think that Jojopyun is the best LeBlanc in the world, but I'm sure he is a very good LeBlanc player, because most mid laners at the pro level are very good at LeBlanc, and that's a good way for them to, like, grind solo queue. But then also Bjergsen's champion pool is really kind of pushed over towards these, like, utility mid laners, and you might not think that Ahri is a utility mid laner, but think about it. She has her charm. She's hypermobile. She has limited damage. She's going to build Everfrost, so there's a lot of utility that comes from that champion, and it's not Bjergsen's job on Ahri to be the primary damage threat. His job is to help engage fights, help disengage fights, and like maintain lane pressure so that he can get to these other skirmishes first. When he's playing things like Viktor, it's about wave clearing and getting to those late game team fights where he can control a portion of the map. Same thing, like we saw his Ahri did very well. The Viktor game, I'm really not a huge fan of Viktor, so like I said, just a burst mage. And then Veigar, the epitome of a burst mage with utility because of the baby cage. So like I said, I think that LeBlanc being eliminated is kind of because of that mid matchup. They're saying two things. Jojo Pyun is good at LeBlanc, and it's good against Bjergsen's champion pool. The next thing I should say is that I think that Evil Geniuses has figured out blue side drafts, especially against teams like 100 Thieves and Team Liquid, who I think will prefer red side. And it's because of Nocturne. Nocturne changes the ability for teams to like put a high priority on like Jarvan, Viego, even like immobile carries like Jinx and Aphelios. You could be in a pretty bad spot if you have an immobile 80 carry against Nocturne, especially if he's snowballing. But also in those jungle matchups, like you're most likely not going to be able to pressure Nocturne enough without ganking him in his jungle. He's pretty good skirmisher in the mid game. So yeah, and it also somewhat eliminates the TF pick because I do just think that Nocturne is good against TF teams. So far we have LeBlanc is getting banned, and then Zeri is going to get banned. They're not going to let Danny play Zeri. Like that'd be insane to me. And if they do it in game 1, I would expect Evil Geniuses to win, and then they take it away the rest of the match. But I think that we should just kind of go into the match assuming they're going to ban Zeri because it's, in my opinion, the right thing to do. And then the last one, the last ban, what are they going to do with the last ban? And that's really the biggest question, and that's what's going to impact the draft significantly. It's either going to be Ryze, Lee Sin, Ornn, Jinx, Ryze, Lee Sin, Ornn, Jinx, or Nocturne. I think those are really the only 5 champions that make sense to ban because of how they impact the rest of the draft. If you let Ornn go through and Evil Geniuses picks Ornn first overall, they have a late game scaling, a theoretical late game scaling advantage because of the additional gold that Ornn is able to give out to his teammates. Then the rest of Evil Geniuses draft would be pretty conservative, and then it would be on Team Liquid to be aggressive in the early game or draft super late game and go toe to toe with the super late game. So, you know, it's a difficult decision to make. I could see it going either way. Like, do I think that Evil Geniuses is going to first pick Ornn every single time? No, but that's a pretty risky proposition for Team Liquid. Because if Evil Geniuses does pick Ornn first, if Evil Geniuses does pick Ornn first, how do you respond? Like, are you going to pick Jinx? Because now you have a top laner who has a good engage option against Jinx, and then you're also allowing Evil Geniuses to play Aphelios or Xayah. I don't like that matchup, but a lot of teams apparently like that matchup where it's the different side. Like if you play Aphelios aggressively enough, then you can do well against the Jinx. But I don't personally, I don't like doing that. But we've seen Evil Geniuses do it in the past, like in Game 5. So yeah, because we could see Ornn first pick for Evil Geniuses, then we could see Team Liquid going like Ryze Jinx. I could see something like that happening as well. But let's just move on. So that boils down to Evil Geniuses needs to know what they want to first pick, Ornn, Ryze, or Jinx. Personally, I would ban Ornn if I were Team Liquid because first picking... Oh no. Okay, so this is for Evil Geniuses. If I was Evil Geniuses, I would ban the Ornn on blue side because they are less likely to play Ornn, and they're less likely to first pick Ornn overall. And I feel like after 100 Thieves Team Liquid match, or Team Liquid's match against 100 Thieves, I think that they are going to place a higher priority onto something like the Ornn. Because if you first pick Jinx or if you first pick Ryze, now you're going up against probably those other two champions, unless the Ryze is getting banned out. So Team Liquid is going to be able to put their own spin on draft, but Evil Geniuses is kind of dictating how the draft is shaping up. Because Evil Geniuses, they're just going to ban like more generic champions. They're most likely going to ban Volibear. They're most likely going to ban Ahri, I think. And then they will have to pick one of these last bans. So that's basically it for the first side of that draft stuff. Let me open up this picture. So this is what that leaves us with. So Evil Genius's first ban is Volley. Team Liquid's first ban is LeBlanc. Then we go with Ahri and Zeri, and then we go with TF and Ryze. So for Evil Geniuses, that last one is going to be TF or Ornn, probably. And for Team Liquid, it's going to be Ryze, Jinx, Ornn, or Nocturne. And if I'm Evil Geniuses, I probably feel like I need to ban the TF or the Ornn, because if I don't ban TF and then Team Liquid third bans Nocturne, Evil Geniuses I don't think wants to pick the TF. I wouldn't want them to pick the TF, and then you are kind of leaving it to Team Liquid to pick with one of their first two picks. So ultimately, I think this is how you would want to hope Evil Geniuses is thinking about draft right now, where it's Volley, Ahri, TF, LeBlanc, Zeri, and then I think that Team Liquid will probably go with the Ryze to try to force Jojo Pyun onto a different champion. So then we have Ornn getting first picked, because I think that Ornn is going to do a lot for Evil Geniuses to have that late game insurance without having to play. It's basically just getting them the late game insurance without having to pick like Jinx and then know that Team Liquid is going to have all this other economy side of things and be able to counterpick that matchup. Like I said, I think that Jinx is the best AD carry, and that's the AD carry that I want my teams to pick. So we'll go Ornn, then it'll be Jinx plus a Santorin champion. And the reason I think it'll be a Santorin champion is because Team Liquid probably wants a counter pick in support. So for Santorin, we're thinking Jarvan. Like he can play a lot of stuff, but like Jarvan, Viego, Lee Sin. Maybe he learns Nocturne. I don't think that they're going to go in that direction though. So one of those 3 or 4 champions. What was the other champion I was thinking of? I think I'm missing one. I forget which one it was. That's fine. So Ornn and then Jinx and Santorin's champion. I do think that Evil Geniuses will opt into the Aphelios matchup. I would prefer them to go the Aphelios side of things than Xayah. Like, Lethality Xayah can win, but it doesn't do enough. It doesn't punish Jinx enough consistently to justify giving up that late game scaling. So with Aphelios, even if the lane goes poorly, you're going to feel like you can like just kill the Jinx one-on-one in the late game if you get the jump on her. And that will, what am I doing? It will force like a certain kind of playstyle from them, but I think that they're more than capable of doing it that way. And then they're going to have to blind a support, so I think they'll either pick Nautilus or Leona probably, which is fine. Like, it's not some like sexy pick, but you don't need to be sexy if you're Evil Geniuses. Their playstyle is kind of the sexy aspect of the team. It's not the champions that they're playing a lot of the time, or at least that's how I think they should approach the game. So we would get something like Aphelios and then Nautilus or Leona. And then I think that we're going to they're going to try to counter support or pick the other side of that Nautilus Leona matchup or pick Thresh. And we haven't seen as much Thresh recently. I don't know if there was like some kind of big ban I'm forgetting about or big nerf I'm forgetting about. But he's dropped in priority a lot. And Core JJ plays a great Thresh. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Jinx Thresh. Or even Jinx Thresh getting picked 1-2 with the anticipation that the other team is going to pick Aphelios, and you don't want to give up Aphelios Thresh. So, I wouldn't be shocked if we saw more Thresh in this series. And this is kind of where we reach our limits for draft preparation. Like, if I were these two teams, I'd be banning out more junglers if I'm Team Liquid and more mid laners if I'm Evil Geniuses. That's going to leave us with Team Liquid not blinding top lane. They're going to be able to pick top lane against the Ornn without showing any additional information. So they're responding to top lane. I don't think they're going to counter top lane though. I think they'll probably just try to meet it with like playing a champion that is going to not be punished very hard by the Ornn in the early game, which does happen sometimes. It's pretty funny, like with Ornn's matchups. But I really don't expect them to go the hardcore punish side of things either. Maybe we see something like Gragas again. I don't know how I would really finish that thought process for Bwipo. It really comes down to what they've been practicing. And then that's going to leave Evil Geniuses blind picking mid lane, which is fine, I think, for JoJo, because he's going to have like 3 or 4 bans out of Bjergsen. So he's going to want to play something that is relatively safe, but gives him agency in the mid game where he will have a big impact by like rotating or having a ton of bringing a lot of damage to late game team fights. And then I think that we'll see a jungle power pick from Inspired, meaning he has the entire jungle champion pool to pick from. So whatever he thinks is a vulnerability about Team Liquid's team, I think that jungle is where they should be trying to exploit that. Like we don't want him playing like Master Yi or something like that. Like maybe it would be cool, but I expect him to pick something that will have a specific game plan in mind. Like if Team Liquid picks some like vulnerable top laner, like attack the top lane by having Ornn plus something that can blow up the top laner consistently, or rotate down to bot consistently and try to get Jinx behind. Because if you get Aphelios ahead of Jinx, you're in a pretty good spot. And then last but not least, I think that Bjergsen's going to get counter pick for mid lane. But the thing with Bjergsen is at this point, his countering you isn't like, oh, I'm going to dominate you in the laning phase and then I'm going to be like a huge damage threat and blow up the enemy team and kind of 1v9. It's more like he will be able to pick a champion that fits nicely into his team composition while also potentially punishing aspects of the other team's team composition. But it's not going to be like a hyper-aggressive champion, I think, in general. And that's basically it. That's a lot longer than I anticipated that video being. But this is a huge matchup, Evil Geniuses against Team Liquid. It was great the last time it happened, and it has a lot of good players. I think that both teams will be powerful in summer and will both hopefully make it to Worlds because they are two of the better teams from North America. I think they're the two best teams in North America. I know that 100 Thieves is playing really well right now, but I think I like Team Liquid more than 100 Thieves right now, like as an international representative. But they have their different limitations. I really think that Evil Geniuses gives us the best chance to have like a shocking performance at Worlds. But we'll just have to see how this matchup plays out. I hope Evil Geniuses wins. I am an Evil Geniuses fan. I think that it's pretty clear now. I continuously talk about it. I'll have my jersey on tomorrow. But that's all I've got for you today. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.